Hi and welcome to this tutorial. In the previous set of tutorials we have done dependency injection for primitives and string member variables of classes. In this tutorial we're going to do some quote-unquote real dependency injection. We're going to have another object which our object is dependent on, and we're going to inject that object to the object that we need. So I'm going to take an example of the triangle. This is the same class that we had used earlier. I'm going to remove some of the stuff here. I don't need all these options here. We had all these constructors and a whole lot of things. We don't need all of that. Now the draw method as well I will rewrite for this tutorial. So the object that I have in mind is a point object. A triangle consists of 3 points, so my triangle object will have 3 different points. So let me first create a point object. So I'll go here to my package, say new, and class. I'll call this point and finish. Now a point consists of 2 values. One is an int x and int y. I'll mark them both as private, and I will generate getters and setters for them. Okay, let's save this. So here what I want to do is I want to have 3 different point objects. So I will say private point A, and the same way I'll have a point B and a point C. So let me generate the getters and setters for these as well. So first generate getters and setters for all of them. Okay, so now the intention here is to use the Spring dependency injection to pre-populate these point values. Now what would we normally do if we were not using Spring? What would we do? We would initialize 3 point objects here. Alright, we would say new point A, new point B, and new point C. We would set the values. We would say point A.x equals, point A.y equals, again point B.x equals, point B.y equals. We would initialize all the values for these 3 points A, B, and C. Then we would say new triangle, and then we would assign the points to this triangle object. So there's a whole lot of initialization that we need to do here. If you're not using Spring, we would have to do all of them manually. Either we'd have to do in the drawing app, or we'll have to do the initialization in the triangle class. If we do the initialization in the triangle class, that means that this triangle will have a fixed coordinates. We'll have a fixed set of coordinates. It'll have only 1 point A, 1 point B, and 1 point C. Of course, you can use the setters to change it, but you would have a fixed starting point. And if you do it over here, then the code would be over here. Then we can have multiple triangle objects with different points. But the thing here is that we would have to do all the initialization ourselves. So in this example, what we're going to do is we're going to use Spring to initialize these 3 points for us. So let's say for this example, we'll just remove this. This is again the remnant of our previous tutorial. Okay, so this is the basic triangle bean definition. So let's say for our example, I'll create 3 points. One is the 0 point, 0, 0, and I'll create 2 more points. I'll have a minus 20, 0, and 0, 20. So these are the 3 coordinates that I want this triangle to have. So I need to define this in my spring.xml. So how do I do that? So the first thing I do is I define 3 different beans for these 3 points. You see here we need 3 point objects. So all the 3 point objects I will define over here. So let's say bean id equals, I'll call this 0 point class equals org dot Kaushik dot Java brains dot point. So I have my point bean definition here. So this is equivalent to calling a new point. So what I'll do is here I will preset the value. So just like I used to do for the other example, in our previous tutorial, I will use a property tag in order to initialize this 0 point with x and y values as 0, 0. So I'll have property name equals x, value equals 0, close this tag. The same way I'll have a property name equals y and value equals 0. So I have defined a 0 point. So this creates an object of this point class with the x and y set as 0. Okay, so this is the first step. Now note that this triangle does not know about that point yet. We need to reference that point here, but as of now we've just created a point object. The same way, what I'll do is I'll create two other point objects. Okay, I'll call this point 2. I'll call this point 3. So the values that I'm going to pass, this one it's going to be minus 20, and for this it's plus 20. Okay, so now we have 3 point objects that we have told Spring to create. Now Spring needs a trigger to create this, right? So let's say, for example, I want to initialize these 3 point objects. I could do this in the drawing app. I could say context.getBean, let's say 0 point, and it would give me a point object with x and y set to 0. It would be an object of this class. It would set x and y as 0, and it would return me a point object. So the same way in my drawing app, if I say getBean of point 2, it would return me an object of this point class again, but with the x and y values set like this. So I can get these objects over here, right? I can get the objects over here, just like I could do a getBean. I can get a 0 point, I can get point 2, and I can get point 3. And I can say triangle.set point A, triangle.set point B, triangle.set point C. That'll work. In that case, this triangle will have these 3 points set as the 3 points that we've defined here. But there is a better way to do this. So just like in our triangle, we did a property, right? We had a property tag, and we had name equals the name of the variable, and value equals the value that we needed to set. So if this were a string, we would have the name, and then we would pass the string itself. In this case, think about it. The member variable is actually an object. Now, since we have referenced the object over here, since we have specified the object over here, what I can do is I can ask Spring to get me this object and set this property. So what I would do is, say I have point A here, right? I would say name equals point A, and the value that I need to set for this is actually a reference to another bean in this XML. So in this case, what I would do is I would not specify a value tag, I'd specify a reference tag, and I would say the value of this should be this bean that I'm referring from the spring.xml. So I'll pass this as 0 point. Okay, now I will do the same thing for the other 2 points as well. So I will have point B, which refers to this point object. I'll have point C, which refers to the third point object. and save. Okay, so now what's going to happen is the Spring framework is going to first encounter the statement context.getBean. Now, the context.getBean, it looks up the spring.xml. It says, okay, I need to return this bean. Now, this bean has three property values set. So it has to satisfy these property assignments before Spring hands over the object back to our application. So what are the properties that we need to be assigned? So we have a point A, which is an object over here that we have defined. It's a point object, and we ask Spring to give a reference to a bean. So this looks up over here. So there is another bean here, which is of point, okay, and it has these two values of the property set. So it's going to create this bean first. This is similar to what we saw earlier. It's going to create the bean, it's going to set the properties, and then instead of returning the bean, what it does is it assigns it to this property of the main bean that it's actually working on. So next it's going to look at point B. It's actually a reference to point 2. Now it's going to create an instance of point 2. It's going to set the values, and it's going to assign this point 2 reference to a property of this bean that it's actually working on. Same way, point 3, it's going to create this point 3 bean, and it's going to assign it to the point C member variable of this triangle object. And then once this triangle object is all created, it's going to return back to this drawing app class that's actually making a reference to the get bean. So Spring does all these things automatically for us. Okay, we don't have to do a get bean of each and every object that we are looking at. We just have to do the first level. Okay, the first level object that we need to get it by a get bean. But then after that, you can have as many nested objects as we want. Now, say for example, the point here has another object as a member variable. You can actually create another bean which is actually an instance of that object, and then do a reference. I can have a property, I can do a ref instead of an actual value here, and then so it's going to be this bean, inside this bean, inside this bean. So you can go as deep as you want. Spring is going to make sure it creates all the beans in order, and it's going to make sure all the properties of this main bean are assigned and satisfied before it hands over the bean back to us. So let's test this out. In my triangle draw, I'm going to print out these 3 points. So I'm going to say system dot out dot println. I'm going to say point A equals, and get point A plus this is get point A dot get X, and this is get point A dot get Y. Okay, so I'm just printing out all the coordinates. It's not anything special here. And then I'm going to close this parenthesis. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the other 2 points. So point B is again get point B dot get X and get point B dot get Y. Point C is get point C dot get X and get point C dot get Y. Okay, now let's run this and see what it prints. There you can see all the 3 points have been pre-filled. So the things that you're seeing here, these are not actually values of the triangle object. This is actually an object inside the triangle object, and that object has these values that you're seeing over here. So Spring does this recursively, and it's going to create all these objects, assign the object to my object that I'm trying to get, and then it's going to return the object. So this is dependency injection that Spring provides for us, and this is very handy because we have a full map of the object that we need. We don't have to do a set point and then do a set X, set Y. All these things have been removed. There's one consolidated place where you have the map of the objects and the values that you need, and you just initialize everything just by doing one call to the getBean method.